Late-night television faced another shakeup last week when ABC announced the indefinite suspension of Jimmy Kimmel Live. The move followed controversial remarks Kimmel made during his Monday monologue about the suspect charged with the killing of Charlie Kirk. The decision immediately sparked confusion. Many reports, including statements from the President of the United States, incorrectly claimed that Kimmel had been fired.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
In reality, ABC confirmed the show was suspended, not canceled. The controversy centered on Kimmel's comments, in which he said, open quote, "We hit some new lows this weekend with the MAGA crowd trying desperately to paint the kid who killed Charlie Kirk as anything but one of their own, twisting the story just to score political points." Close quote. According to industry reports, Kimmel had planned to clarify his remarks during Wednesday's broadcast. He intended to explain that he was not labeling the shooter as MAGA, but rather pointing out that many were trying to describe him as anything else. However, following a statement from FCC Chairman Brendan Carr condemning the remarks, and after several affiliates moved to drop the show, Disney executives decided to suspend Kimmel. Sources indicated the suspension was a preemptive step, meant to avoid the risk of an outright cancellation if Wednesday's clarification further fueled the controversy. Following ABC's suspension of Jimmy Kimmel Live, attention quickly turned to the role of the Federal Communications Commission, FCC. On Wednesday, FCC Chairman Brendan Carr appeared on a podcast hosted by Benny Johnson, an ally of Charlie Kirk. During the discussion, Carr criticized Kimmel's remarks and suggested that licensed broadcasters airing such content could face consequences under FCC rules regarding news distortion. Carr stated that local affiliates should consider preempting Kimmel's show until the matter was addressed, warning that stations risked fines or even license revocation if programming was deemed to represent a pattern of news distortion. The FCC's definition of news distortion is narrowly applied. According to the agency's own policy, enforcement only applies when it can be proven that a broadcaster deliberately misled the public in a factual news report. Errors, opinions, or isolated mistakes do not qualify. The policy requires documented evidence such as testimony from insiders, management directives, or records of intentional falsification. Without such proof, the FCC typically cannot intervene. Moreover, the rules generally apply to news programming, raising questions over whether a late-night comedy show like Jimmy Kimmel Live even falls under the regulation. Carr's comments, however, added pressure. While he later denied explicitly threatening to pull any licenses, his remarks framed Kimmel's comments as potential news distortion, implying that affiliates airing the program risked sanctions. Critics argued this amounted to the FCC chairman signaling consequences despite the agency's limited authority in such cases. Supporters of Kimmel noted the irony that Carr himself might now be at the center of a controversy over words being misinterpreted or taken out of context, the same defense Kimmel had intended to use for his own remarks. The controversy also highlighted the difficulty of distinguishing between comedy, commentary, and factual reporting in broadcast media. Although Carr insisted his podcast comments were meant to encourage local affiliates and national networks to resolve the issue privately, the fallout showed how quickly such statements from regulators can escalate into larger disputes. Soon after Carr's podcast appearance, the media company Nexstar announced that it would be pulling Jimmy Kimmel Live from its ABC affiliates. Affiliate networks act as local broadcasters for major national networks such as ABC, CBS, and NBC. While they carry national programming, they manage their own local advertising and news, and it is these affiliates, not the parent networks, that hold the broadcast licenses subject to FCC oversight. Nexstar's decision was significant because it owns major ABC affiliates in cities including Salt Lake City, Nashville, Knoxville, Syracuse, New Orleans, and Richmond. Removing Kimmel's show from those markets substantially reduced his national reach. Reports from The Hollywood Reporter and New York Times indicated that ABC and its parent company Disney acted only after Carr's remarks drew heightened scrutiny. Social media engagement spiked around calls to cancel Kimmel, and multiple affiliate owners held urgent discussions with Disney executives. They demanded clarity on how Kimmel would address the controversy on his next broadcast, and when the response was deemed unsatisfactory, pressure intensified. Advertising partners also began raising concerns. Ultimately, Nexstar and another media giant, Sinclair Broadcasting, threatened to preempt the show altogether, with at least 66 of roughly 200 affiliates refusing to carry it. At that point, ABC formally announced the suspension, a decision signed off by Disney leadership, including Bob Iger and Dana Walden. Sinclair Broadcasting, the country's largest ABC affiliate owner, released a statement praising the suspension but went further, declaring that Kimmel would not return to its stations until appropriate steps were taken to uphold standards of national broadcast platforms. Sinclair also revealed that it had already communicated its decision to ABC prior to the suspension, reinforcing the level of affiliate influence in the process. The company's leadership linked the incident to broader regulatory concerns, calling for the FCC to act on the power held by national networks over local stations. Sinclair, long associated with conservative-leaning programming, has previously been accused of using its platforms to advance partisan viewpoints, adding a political dimension to the standoff. The confrontation between networks and affiliates echoed earlier moments in late-night television history. In 2009, affiliates pressured NBC to cancel Jay Leno's primetime show after poor ratings dragged down their local news broadcasts. Their revolt provided NBC with justification to replace Conan O'Brien with Leno as host of The Tonight Show. The Kimmel dispute highlighted the same structural dynamic. Powerful affiliate groups wield the ability to force programming changes at the national level when their local markets are threatened. The Telecommunications Act of 1996, signed into law by President Bill Clinton, significantly reduced restrictions on how many broadcast stations a single company could own. This deregulation allowed media conglomerates to expand aggressively, consolidating control over large portions of the U.S. broadcasting market. Nexstar, for example, was founded the same year the act was passed and quickly began acquiring local stations nationwide. Sinclair likewise expanded rapidly, becoming one of the largest owners of local television outlets in the country. At the time of Kimmel's suspension, Nexstar was in the process of seeking approval for a merger with Tegna, another large affiliate owner with stations in major cities including Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Austin, Denver, Atlanta, Seattle, and Memphis. If completed, the merger would give the combined company access to an estimated 75 to 80% of U.S. households, far exceeding the FCC's current ownership cap of 39%. For the deal to move forward, Nexstar would require a special waiver from the FCC, as well as clearance from the Department of Justice. Sinclair had also been lobbying the FCC to relax ownership limits, aiming to expand its own reach even further. The timing raised questions about whether these business interests influenced Nexstar's actions against Kimmel. While the company denied any direct connection, analysts noted that Chairman Brendan Carr's comments could have signaled to affiliates that failure to act might invite regulatory scrutiny. For a corporation hoping to secure a multi-billion-dollar merger, avoiding conflict with the FCC would be critical. By suspending Kimmel, Nexstar effectively positioned itself as cooperative with regulatory concerns, while shielding its affiliates from potential penalties or investigations. This intersection of regulatory power, corporate consolidation, and political controversy underscored broader concerns about the relationship between government agencies and media corporations. Critics argued that when companies grow so large, their dependence on federal approval for mergers and acquisitions gives regulators disproportionate leverage. That leverage, in turn, can be used to indirectly pressure networks into silencing voices or programming that government officials disapprove of, raising alarms about free speech and political influence over the press. Framing it as long overdue accountability in a media environment they viewed as skewed toward liberal perspectives. Supporters argued that Kimmel's comments crossed a line and that consequences were justified. On the other side, many liberal voices condemned the suspension as a chilling violation of free speech, warning that it represented the federal government using its influence to silence one of the president's most outspoken critics. Protests in support of Kimmel soon appeared outside Disney headquarters, and at local affiliates across the country, while calls to cancel subscriptions to Disney-owned services such as Hulu and Disney Plus gained traction online. Yet the response was not split strictly along partisan lines. Some prominent conservatives, including Senator Ted Cruz and former Fox News host Tucker Carlson, also expressed unease with the FCC's involvement. They warned that if a Republican-led commission could exert pressure against a liberal comedian, a future Democratic administration might apply the same tactics against conservative commentators. The concern was not limited to ideology, but centered on precedent, whether a federal agency should ever have the power to indirectly force programming decisions based on political controversy. After several days of mounting pressure, Disney announced that Jimmy Kimmel Live would return to the air. Executives explained that the suspension had been intended to calm a tense situation at a sensitive national moment, but after discussions with Kimmel, they believed the show could continue. The decision, approved by Disney CEO Bob Iger and television chair Dana Walden, was described as being made in the company's best interest rather than in response to outside factors. Variety reported that Kimmel would resume broadcasting on Tuesday night. However, affiliate cooperation remained uneven. Sinclair Broadcasting, the largest owner of ABC affiliates in the country, declared that it would continue preempting Jimmy Kimmel Live across its stations, replacing the program with local news coverage until further notice. Discussions with ABC were ongoing, Sinclair said, but the company insisted that national programming must meet the standards expected of a broadcast platform. This meant that even though the show officially returned, large swaths of the country would not see it on traditional television. Instead, many viewers would turn to platforms such as YouTube, where Kimmel's monologues are widely shared. The controversy left lasting questions about the balance between government authority, corporate consolidation, and free expression. Critics stressed that while audiences are free to boycott, protest, or denounce a public figure, regulators should not wield the threat of sanctions in ways that appear to silence disfavored voices. The incident also highlighted how deregulation and mergers have concentrated power in a few affiliate corporations, giving them an outsized ability to shape national programming. Observers warned that if such practices became routine, they could create an environment where media companies, fearing regulatory pressure, act less out of editorial judgment and more to appease government agencies. Kimmel's suspension and reinstatement thus became more than a late-night television story. It reflected the fragile intersection of politics, business, and media in modern broadcasting, raising concerns that today's target might be tomorrow's precedent. For critics of the decision, the underlying principle was clear. If one accepts government influence over programming simply because the individual in question is disliked, the same tools could later be turned against those on the opposite side.